Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Breath of Hope. Chapter 4, Banther Lodge, Part 1. After Ezran had shown his new friends around the lodge, they decided to move all the food to the kitchen. In doing so, the trio had worked up an appetite. So they pulled together a spread of various foods that had the various foods that had been delivered, and gathered the preserves that were already in the cabinets. Considering their differences and the situation around them, it was oddly relaxing to sit down together and finally unwind. Rayla helped herself to some fruit and berries, and Ezran went for the dried fish and bread. Bate wasted no time in snatching some berries for himself. Callum, however, just sat and stared, amazed by this collection. He was so overwhelmed by the smells, colors, and differences. "Callum, you all right?" Rayla noticed his distress. I don't know what to have," he confessed, eyes shifting downward in embarrassment. Rayla and Ez looked at each other, and Ezran smiled. "Well, try everything." "What?" "Have some of everything. See what you like." For a moment, it looked like the dragon's mind was about to explode. But Ezran reached across the table and picked up a ripe green pear, holding it out to him. "Here, try a pear." He sniffed cautiously before taking it, turning it over in his fingers. Callum looked over each side, then prodded at it a bit before taking the largest bite he could. Ezran covered his mouth to keep from laughing at the dragon's actions. As he chewed the fruit, his brow raised as if trying to decide the taste. Finally, he froze, and a queasiness came over his expression. Before anyone could say or do anything, he opened his mouth and let out a half-chewed and let the half-chewed mess fall to the table and onto the plate before him. The sight of the half-eaten food made Rayla gag, while Ezran only broke into hysterics, almost falling off his chair. Confused by their reactions, Callum sank back into his seat a little. Did I do something wrong? Reaching over for the plate, the elf put it to the side. No, Callum, you just looks like you don't like pears. Yeah, why don't you try this? Ezran smirked, a devilish evil spark in his eye. This time he held out an apple. Before he could take hold of it, Rayla's blades had stabbed it out of the human's hand and tossed it into the air, and in a dramatic fashion sliced it into four smaller bite-sized pieces. Just a little bit this time, she said, offering one to the dragon and glaring at the human for his attempted mischief. As if tasting his freedom, Callum slowly tried every single item on the table, including pure salt. He decided he liked the cheese, loved the meat, the bread. The bread was much nicer than before, and he decided that fruit was not always the best. Eventually, he picked up a bit of something that smelled funny, but he was sure he wanted to try it. Putting the item in his mouth, he soon felt the familiar queasiness as when he had eaten the pear. He leaned forward, ready to spit it out again, when Rayla stood up and pointed at him. "Oh, no, you don't," she scolded a little sharply. "It's only a small bite. You can still eat it even if you don't like it." The dragon stared at her, then looked between the plate and the elf before he leaned back and thickly swallowed whatever had disgusted him, shivering slightly at the effort. "I don't like that," he said, pointing to the plate of fish. "I kind of guessed." After the meal was finished, they had cleaned up, the trio headed to the main part of the lodge. There, Ezran helped set up a fire in the hearth, and they sat down for their first evening in the lodge. Callum had found himself a large chair to sit in, lounging across it with his wings folded behind him and his tail around his body. He was silent for a bit, watching the fire crackle and burn before he turned his gaze to the others. The human sat with bait on the floor, playing with a toy, while Rayla stood by the window looking out for danger. Forcing himself up, he looked at her for a while, then bit his lip. "Rayla, can I ask you something?" "What is it, Callum?" "Well, you know who I am, right? Can you tell me?" he asked, embarrassed as he looked at his hands. "Tell you what?" "Who I am." He kept his head lowered as he spoke. I've forgotten." Rayla glanced at him with a haunted expression, before nodding and moving to sit beside him. "Sure. Well, you're the Dragon Prince." "What does that mean?" "It means you are the son of King Ezran and Queen Zuiba, their only child." "Well, there was talk of another egg, but apparently it hasn't hatched, so you are the only living heir. One day you are going to rule over all of Xadia." "I am?" he asked, surprised and a little scared of the idea. "Yeah, but 10 years ago, you were stolen away by a human mage." He cowered back. "Master Viren." Anger filled the moon shadow's eyes at the name. "Yeah, him. But everyone thought you had been killed, so A war started between the humans and Xadia.
A war?
Lots of people have been hurt, and killed, Callum. Families torn apart by it. But hopefully, with you alive, we can stop the fighting. Callum looked down at his hands, the tips of his fingers still raw from having his talons so overclipped.
But how can I stop the fighting?
By showing everyone you're alive.
Will that be enough?
We can only hope.
So, I'm gonna be King Callum.
The elf winced a little. No. You'll be King Cadmondius.
Cad what?
That's your real name, she explained with a smile. Don't you remember?
I don't remember anything but that room.
Did that man put a spell on you?
No, I just forgot.
She sighed and gently put her arm around him, pulling him towards her. Don't worry, it's going to be all right. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know.
Promise?
Promise. He leaned his head on her shoulder for a bit before looking up as best he could.
Rayla, do I have to be Cadmondius?
What do you mean?
I like Callum. It's the only name I know. I like it.
Well, I guess we can call you Callum as a nickname if you wish.
Please?
All right, Callum. He went quiet for a bit, thinking about what he had been told.
So, what does it mean to be a dragon?
Rayla looked down at Callum, his cheek resting comfortably against her shoulder, while he stared on in thought. She reached to his hair and brushed it back softly. To be a dragon is to be one of the most powerful and beautiful creatures in Xadia, she explained. They're the protectors of our land, and those who dwell within it.
But what's it like?
She chuckled a little and scratched his ear. I wouldn't know, silly. I'm not a dragon. Callum winced a little at his mistake, pulling slightly away, but Rayla pulled him back. But I imagine it's amazing. Dragons can change form, you know.
Really?
Yeah, right now you're in what's known as hybrid or halfways. Dragons can shift between an elfoid or humanoid form to a hybrid or to a full dragon.
What's a full dragon?
Ezran turned at that one.
A full dragon is this enormous creature with a long neck and great big wings that causes trees to bend when they move. And they can breathe fire. Callum's eyes went shockingly wide at the description. And that's what I am?
Yeah, you're a dragon, but you're strong enough to... Yeah, you're a dragon, but you're not strong enough to shift yet.
I'm not?
Callum, you can barely make it up the stairs without running out of breath, Rayla reminded him softly. But give it some time. You'll get there. Putting his head back on her shoulder, the prince thought, then nodded.
So, what about being the Dragon Prince? What does that mean?
I told you, one day you'll rule over all of Xadia.
But that's one day. What about now?
Rayla thought for a moment at the question. Now, it means you're a prince.
So, what does it mean to be a prince? I might be better suited to answer that question, the human said, standing up with a proud smile, since I am a prince myself.
Rayla smirked at him as she continued to stroke Callum's hair.
All right then, Ez, what does it mean to be a prince? Clearing his voice, the boy closed his eyes and stood straight with his hands raised slightly. A prince is an apprentice king, a boy learning the trade of his father. As such, he needs to act with the responsibility of the king he will become. He should always ensure his actions look favorable on his country. He should remember that every life is precious and every action has consequences. And above all, he must remember a king is nothing without his people, so he should ensure they are protected and cared for. Rayla blinked at the description. Well, that was really good. Yeah, well, he blushed, rubbing the back of his neck and looking sheepish. The royal tutors kind of drilled it into me. Callum chuckled. So that's what being a prince means. Yeah, it's also all sorts of silly things like always using a napkin and never sticking pencils in your hair and making sure you don't use the salad fork on the fish course. Stuff like that. I don't like fish, Callum muttered and pulled a disgusting face at the memory. We know, the elf said, scratching his ear again. Callum smiled when he looked at the fire, but he felt his eyes drifting closed, and his head nodded. A wave of exhaustion crashed over him, and Rayla smirked as he forced himself back up. All right, you two, time to get some sleep. But Rayla, you don't want to hear it. You might be a prince, and I know better right now. So come on, time for bed. She stood up and looked down at him. Come on, both of you. It's getting late, and you need your rest, Callum. Ezran yawned as he stood. Yeah, it would be nice to sleep in a bed tonight. Come on, Callum. I'll show you your room. My room? The dragon asked, walking with the others upstairs to a landing with 4 doors. Ezran pushed one open and revealed a room with a window, double bed, a chest, and a small table. Here you go. You can have this one. As explained. Callum looked around the room perplexed. Why is it mine? Well, you sleep in here, the human continued, going over to the bed and climbing on. See, this is a bed. Bed for sleeping in. Come on, try it. Confused, the dragon walked over and placed a hand on the cover. He withdrew it quickly, eyes widened. It moved. The human chuckled. Yeah, because it's soft. Come on, Callum. Climb on. Fear of this new thing, the prince slowly climbed into it, crawling on his hands and knees while he tried to get a hold of his balance. Once he had, he looked at Ez. Now what? You lie down, silly, Rayla added as she walked over and pulled the covers near the top. Here, put your head on this and lie down here. With slight uneasy movements, he did as told, and laid on his back. His wings spread to the side, and his tail trailed to the floor. It's warm. That's the idea. Now you pull this up, the elf continued, unable to believe she was teaching a dragon how to get into bed. So you stay nice and warm. Callum, with only his head visible, smiled. I like this bed. Yeah, they are nice. Smells nice, he mumbled sleepily, his eyes drooping until they closed. Holding a finger to her lips, Rayla nodded for the door. Ezra nodded in reply, and they quietly made their way out. Callum suddenly sat up, sending the covers flying. Where are you going? He gasped, fear in his eyes. You're not leaving me, are you? Hurrying over, the elf held his hand and cupped his cheek. No, Callum, we won't leave you. Ez is going to his own room with the bed, and I'll be outside keeping watch, making sure you're safe. I won't be far, I promise. Promise? I swear on my life, I won't be far. He nodded into her hand and slowly moved back to lie down.
Rayla tucked him in and brushed his hair back as he closed his eyes again. Once he was asleep, she made her way out and closed the door until it was only slightly ajar. In the hallway, she looked at Ezran, who was holding bait to his chest. "You gonna tuck me in too?" Rayla looked at him, wondering if he was serious before shaking her head and turning away. "You're big enough to get yourself into bed," she told him before heading downstairs into the dying fireplace. Ezran pouted a little, but shrugged, heading to his own room and climbing into the bed he normally slept in when at the lodge.